at the time, like I always grew up knowing that I was adopted and everything like that, but I don't think it's been more recently that it's really made me realize just what a big impact that actually was.
Mm.
So I like to say, like, it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you're going and the lives that you change along the way that really matter. And so for me, that's what I'm always looking to do. It's almost like living up to my full potential because I was given this gift of almost like a second chance and a second life.
Hey guys, welcome to episode number 243 of the Game On Girlfriend podcast. If you've ever been stuck in a job you hate, oh, who's raising their hand? I saw you, right? If you have ever been nervous that there's only one possible path for you to take in order to use your college degree and that everything else is off limits, you've got to keep your head down, you got to put in your dues, you have to do things this way if you want this career path to work for you. Yeah. I don't know about you. I'm raising my hand. That has absolutely been what I was told when I first graduated, those first couple jobs where you can feel a little bit disillusioned. Yeah, you're like, why am I working this hard? I'm making $2.50 and everybody's telling me I'm young and I'm really smart and I'm really good at what I do. If you've ever had that experience, or if you're stuck in a job and you're about to make that entrepreneurial leap, you are going to be so happy that you stopped by the Game On Girlfriend podcast today because my guest, Lata Hamilton, is the woman you've been looking for. Lata Hamilton is a change leadership and confidence expert and the creator of Leading Successful Change program. After tripling her salary, yes, tripling her salary in just 3 years to almost $200,000, her mission is to help other millennial women carve their own paths for change in career, leadership, and life, and find the confidence and authenticity to truly earn their worth. Lata has worked with some of Australia's biggest companies, and the changes that she's made have impacted over 100,000 people. Operating model changes that have impacted thousands, global cultural transformations, and digital transformations that is literally going to change the way we work. As you're listening to Lata's interview today, I hope you take a second to notice how her personal life has really paralleled her career path and what she's chosen to do with the way that she opens her mind to new possibilities and the way she teaches others to be open to new possibilities. I sort of asserted with her in the interview that I think this might be her calling. She pushed back a second until she started listening to her own story. You guys, I hope you get that the way you go through life, sometimes it's the harder things that we've gone through. Sometimes it's the challenges you'd be like, thank you very much. I'd like to not have that. Sometimes those are the very things that end up opening doors for us and creating new opportunities because we have a different energy. You have a different energy to what you're bringing to your career and your work. And it's an energy no one else can quite match because it belongs to you. Lata has built this extraordinary business, this extraordinary life by being true to herself and not letting anyone else tell her what's possible. Pop in those earphones and let's get to it. Lata, welcome to the Game On Girlfriend podcast. I'm really looking forward to chatting with you today.
Thanks so much, Sarah. I'm super excited to be here.
We have to just break this down for a hot second because you've done a bunch of really, really cool things in your life. I think throughout your career path, things have been amazing. And then all of a sudden you did this amazing thing. But I still have to ask you before we dive into your amazing thing, why, out of all the things that Lata could be doing on planet Earth, right? Like all of the skills that you have, all of your expertise, why is this conversation the one that you really want to have right now?
It's a great question. And I think for me, a bit about my backstory is that I was actually born in India. So I was born, and my first couple of years, I actually lived in an orphanage.
Gosh.
And the orphanage was really filled with girls, like in India at that time. This was in
Mhm.
the 80s and like early 90s. It was like girls were just sort of not seen as being very valued. So the orphanage was just filled with girls. There wasn't as many boys. And my parents were Australian and they adopted me to Australia.
Mm.
And it completely transformed the trajectory of my life, completely, in like a way that at the time, like I always grew up knowing that I was adopted and everything like that, but I don't think it's been more recently that it's really made me realize just what a big impact that actually was.
Mm.
So I like to say, like, it doesn't matter where you start, it's where you're going and the lives that you change along the way that really matter. And so for me, that's what I'm always looking to do. It's almost like living up to my full potential because I was given this gift of almost like a second chance and a second life.
That's amazing. Oh my gosh. I didn't know that, which, oh my gosh, what a great part of your story. And I see the parallels. I really get what you're saying. Like, I can see the parallels between getting a second shot at life in general and then what you decided to do around money, around career, around feminism. I mean, I think it's so, so powerful. Does it feel for you? You guys, she didn't know I was going to ask her this. Does it feel for you like this is like a pull for you that this was almost, I want to say a calling? I don't know. Does that make it too woo woo? But does it feel like that for you to be the person who says, listen, you can do something about this? Here's what you do.
I don't know if I love doing what I do and I'm very
Mm,
passionate about it. I don't know if it was ever like when I was a kid and things like that. I don't think it was ever something that I thought, oh, yeah, this is what I want to do or this is what I want to be when I grow up.
mm,
Instead, I was probably more just naturally a leader. And I didn't realize that. I remember actually really early on, like I was like, oh, like my friends are always looking at me to figure out where to go and sit for lunch. And so I played a little experiment. I was like 8 or 10 at the time, like between the ages of 8 and 10. And so I played this little experiment where I like went out of the school building, go out of the school building, and I let them go ahead of me so that I like held myself back purposely. And I watched them like sort of like 5 paces in front, kind of like start to mill about and get a bit confused. And it was that day actually that I realized like I'm like, oh damn, like I'm a leader. Like they looked to me to figure out where to sit. And they finally got there. Like they were like, oh, where should we sit? But like normally it would just be me sort of making that decision, being that
mm,
person that they could follow and that they could really get behind and being decisive, I guess. And so I think from then it was sort of like there were just these opportunities that I had. And it was never something because I was quite shy as a kid. And so it was never something that I thought I would become this sort of leader or be a particular figure where I'd be really looking to inspire and empower people,
mm.
but and especially women. But I think it just kind of started to happen naturally because I was good at what I would do. I was passionate about what I would do. People would come to me for advice, and I must have just had these sort of these natural leadership qualities. And then I sort of built those over time through my career and my business.
I love it. Well, it does seem like it was something you were gifted though. 8 to 8, you were like, let me see what happens if I'm not the leader. That is like amazing. I don't know many 8-year-olds who are like, dude, let me do a test at lunch and see what happens. Like, that's amazing, actually. And so I'm gonna push back on you just a tad there, Lata, and say, I don't know. This sounds a little bit like something you were gifted. But that's really extraordinary that you saw that at such a young age. And I don't want to say you were like you proved it, but you did. You were like, let me wait, what does this mean? How does this work? What's going to happen? I mean, that is really advanced thinking for such a young age for you to sort of see where the pieces fit and who you
Mm.
were inside those pieces. That's extraordinary.
Thank you. And I think like as you become more of a leader and you step into your leadership, you attract the people who are the
Mm,
right sort of followers for you. And I sort of don't think of it really as sort of like a leader and follower. I think of it as more, I'm here doing my thing and being an example and trying to showcase what your life can look like and what your life can be. And I have a lot of things in my life that are very sort of like not by the book. Like when I say carve my own path, I truly mean carve my own path. Like I never got married. Instead, we had this thing called a happiness odyssey, and it wasn't even a commitment ceremony because
oh my
we
God.
like replan our relationship every 5 years because we want to make sure that we're happy.
Oh,
I'm
I
not
love
having
this.
children, and yeah, and my parents think that I'm crazy because of the way that I have set up my career, my life, and my business,
Mm,
because it's so out of the ordinary and so non-traditional. And I want to live life the way that I want to live it and on my terms, and then be that inspiration for others to not necessarily follow in my footsteps and be followers, but instead to have that courage and that confidence to be able to do what they want to do in the way that they want to do it and to choose for themselves.
Well, that's what a real leader does, right? I mean, I think the role modeling piece of leadership, not that it's overlooked, but it can be, right? It's like you need to have
Mm.
these traits and these skills, and like then you're a leader. It's like, really? Or is it more that you actually inspire other people to take action based on your behavior? And I think that's what you're pointing to is like, I'm just here doing my thing. And I've noticed when I do my thing, these other things start to happen. And I don't know. I think that's very cool. And I can see how this served you in changing your career and saying, listen, this is not the amount of money I want to be paid. It's time for me to make some changes. So I would love to know a little bit for you, like what happened? Like here you are going along. I'm awesome. I'm doing my thing. I got my career. And you're like, nope, not enough money. I'm making some changes. What happened?
Yeah, so I think for me, I grew up in a very traditional household where, My dad was the breadwinner of the family. My mum was a stay-at-home mum. And so as I was growing up through school and even into university, like I just, at an unconscious level, like I'd never really planned to follow in my dad's footsteps, but at an unconscious level, like I must have thought to myself that that is the path to success. You know, you go into a job for life, you get promotion after promotion, pay rise after pay rise. And my dad had been in like one company in different roles, but one company for the entire time that I'd been in the
Mm.
family, like and alive. So for 25 years. And so for me, I was like, okay, that's what I have to do. And even though I had gone into university doing something that was much more creative, so I did media and communications and learned how to do sort of like journalism and websites and radio production and video production, like really hands on and like super creative and really kind of like more artistic. It was funny because I came out and I went into advertising and I looked at my salary offer for my first role in advertising. I'd been working there casually and I looked at my salary offer. And I was like, oh my goodness, I could have skipped the 4 years that I went to university, went to college, could have skipped those 4 years and just gone and stacked supermarket shelves and I would have earned the same. And like, there's nothing wrong with stacking supermarket shelves. I've worked for supermarkets before, but it was more that I was like, why did I spend that time, 4 years investing in myself, the time and the effort and the energy and obviously the expense as well, like for this salary. And so I was always very money minded. And so that's when I went into the corporate space because I was like, at some level, I was like, well, corporate is the way that you go in order to get a bigger salary. But
Right.
that's not what happened because I'm not my dad. I'm not a 50-year-old white man. I'm like, you know what I mean?
So good.
I'm
Very
a,
important.
a young millennial who entered the workforce after the GFC,
Mm.
who is much more sort of like creative and sort of much more into doing things my way and wanting that variety and that challenge and that stimulation and acceleration and ambition. And yeah, within the first couple of years of being in my corporate career, I just felt completely stuck and completely stifled because I was like coming up against people who they were like, you've got to do your time. And I wasn't getting pay rises. I wasn't getting promotions. I was getting maybe like $1,000 or $2,000 pay rise. I'm like, why? Like, and the weirdest thing is I was actually on a graduate program. So I was actually being trained to become a leader. And when we came off the graduate program, it was like, cool, you're going into this entry level role. And I'm like, but then why bother training us as leaders? So I was
Right.
very frustrated, super frustrated. And I'm like, is it going to take me 20, 25 years to, like get to $200,000 a year salary and to have a team of, 50 to 200 people? But that was what I thought that success was. Like I thought that's the path to get there. And so I ended up sort of getting some coaching and changing into a new company, got a $20,000 pay rise in one move, which was amazing. Like it was just so, so, so good. And then it was there that I found out about change management. And if you don't know anything about organizational change management, love to define things really simply. It's moving people from doing things in one way to doing things in a new way in a company. And we do that through communications, training, and business readiness. Because change management is project work, it has that variety, it has that flexibility, it has that challenge, and like that freedom to really sort of work on different things, which is what I wanted. And then suddenly, within just a couple of years, well, actually within the first year of moving into change management, I was suddenly like leading change, like being the change lead on these projects. And within a couple of years, I'm like leading changes that have impacted over 100,000 people. Like
Wow.
I was able to get into that leadership role without necessarily having to like do the time. And I also tripled my salary in the space of 3 years by making really strategic decisions about my career.
It's so good. I want to go back to the very first position and the disillusionment that I think
Mm.
we don't talk about enough as a world of
Mm.
that. I've gone to college, right? I've gone to uni, right? I've done my thing. I'm doing right. And then for this, wait, I did all that for this. And here in the States, since it's so ridiculously expensive, right? So it's like my parents saved for years for this, or I just went into debt for this. And you come out and you're making $3.50 and everyone says weird things like you've got to, earn your stripes and pay your dues. And you're
Yeah.
like, what are you talking about? I'm here to make everything better. Why are you talking to me like I'm five? And I think that disillusionment is so real. And I
Mm.
think what I'd love to know is like, what did you do internally? Like, how did you flip that mindset from, well, I guess I just have to eat the grits. I don't know what else like, how did you flip from, I guess this is the way it is, to really working through and making that first shift to the extra 20K by making that move?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd already been doing that a little bit even before I had left university college. So because I had been working in a cafe while I was at uni, it was like in my last year, because I'd been doing sort of internships, unpaid internships over each summer. So over the summers, instead of, well, I would go to the beach still. It is Australia. I'd go to the beach, but I was also, like working a couple of days a week to make money and then working a couple of days a week, 2 to 3 days a week for free. So it was just like, I felt even by the time I had gotten to that last year of university, I was like, you know what? I want to start getting paid for the stuff that I know how to do. And so that's when I actually made the move from working in a cafe while I was at university to actually doing casual work at an advertising agency. And so I had that sort of that rung, that like step on the ladder, that first rung. So then it was almost like a natural progression when I moved into the corporate space. Again, it was kind of a bit like, okay, well, now I finished the graduate program, so I want to be paid for, the leadership programs that you've put me through and the expertise that I've built over the last couple of years. I want to have that recognition and that step up. And I love to say, like, we're not going to work for fun. Like, work can be fun and, we should have a good time while we're there, and it should be, a safe and fulfilling place. But it's like, we're not going to work for fun. Otherwise it would be a hobby or it would be volunteering.
That's
We
right.
actually want to go to be compensated. We want to go to make our living and make our livelihood. And then that to me is sort of like the launch pad to the rest of your life. It's like the income that you're able to make with starting out with whatever is your career foundation becomes that launch pad to how you can set up and live the rest of your life and do whatever you want to do. Like maybe that is starting a business, maybe that is growing a family, maybe that is, traveling the world, like whatever it is for you that you want to do, you can absolutely use career as the launch pad for that. So I think it was this kind of progression where I just went, hang on a second. It's not what my value is right here today. It's the full accumulation of my value. And I had been building those skills since the first year of university. So I'm like, you shouldn't be, what's the word?
Discounting,
Not addressing.
right?
Yeah, discounting, but like, it's like, you shouldn't be not judging. It's the wrong word, but like valuing me based on the last 2 years that I've been working at this organization. You should be valuing me on the sort of 5 to 7 years that I've been building these skills.
Yes. And I think you're onto something there. And I also want to say what value you're contributing now that might be even more valuable to the business in the future, to the company, to the people I get to work with, the ideas I start, the seeds that get planted. And
Yeah.
just because it comes from someone who's quote unquote new doesn't mean it's not incredibly valuable. And I love that you sort of like took a stand for that of like, wait a second. Mm-mm. So I love this. So the mindset, because I'm sure we have somebody listening, right, who's just graduated college. They've had that first job and they're like, what just happened? I've been sold a bill of goods, right? That moment of like, okay, let's start working on that mindset.
Mm.
Really looking at everything you already know, looking at the value that you bring and looking at the value for the years that you've already put in. Even though they're green years, they're young years, it doesn't mean they're not incredibly valuable. I love that. So if someone's listening and they're like, okay, well, that's great for Lata. She could do that. She's amazing, right? I'm stuck. There's nothing I can do. What would you say to somebody who's actually feeling that way? Like, I can't get out of this. Golden handcuffs, right? Like, whatever it is, that feeling of like, yeah, that's just good for her. What would you say in response to that?
Yeah. So my dad always said he did have some good career advice, even though he is a baby boomer. He did have really good career advice at times. So he always said it's much easier to get a new job or carve a new path, when you're already in something. So it's being a bit more proactive about your career, not waiting until change is forced upon you. So maybe not waiting until you're laid off or waiting until you're redundant or waiting until you have that baby or waiting until, whatever it is for you that becomes the trigger as to why you make a change in your career. If you're feeling stuck and frustrated right now, that is sapping your energy, that is sapping your soul. So now is the time to start putting change into action. Now is the time to start thinking about what it is that you actually want. And so I love to define confidence as being when you get really clear about who you are, what you want, what value you bring to the table, and then what you're worth. So when you get really clear on those 4 things, suddenly it's like, you have that clarity around what your career could be. And for me, it was starting to have conversations like because I was in a temporary when I made that move and got the 20K pay rise, because I was sort of already knew that was like a fixed term contract. So I knew it had an end date. So I was really easy talking to people going like, oh, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. Do you know what I mean? Like there was no,
There
because I
wasn't that
wasn't in a
pressure
permanent role.
of when
Have to be
reviews
quiet.
come around. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I can
I
get
was able
that.
to just kind of say that. Like I was able to just kind of ask people like for things. And then that's when a colleague actually said to me, oh, have you thought about change management? Because she'd worked in project management before. And she had actually told me her salary like years ago, because she was already a bit older than me, years ago. And I was just like, she was like, oh yeah, I don't like 120,000. And I was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, what? Like at the time that I was literally like just coming out of uni, like she was already earning like probably double what I had been earning.
Mm,
And so I was like, so this is possible. And it was about opening up that possibility. And that
yeah,
came from having conversations, having trusted conversations with people that I, felt that I could actually have those conversations with. As women, we often don't want to talk about money. We don't want to talk about salary.
right,
We are
right.
taught that it's rude, that it's not a polite thing to do to discuss money. But often what that means is that we don't understand what is possible out there for us. And I love to share my salary and my salary progressions really openly because I want to inspire people around what's possible. Like if I can triple my salary in the space of 3 years to earning almost $200,000, anybody can do that. And so it was that conversation with her, and then she was like, oh, I think you'd be really great in change management. And I had no idea what it was, but I went and had a conversation with somebody in my company, found out a little bit about it. And when I found out about it, I was like, oh my goodness, this actually does sound perfect for me, because I'd been doing neurolinguistic programming and coaching, so NLP for short,
Mhm.
neurolinguistic programming and coaching, which is the study of excellence in behavior, communications, and psychology, or your emotions. And then I was becoming a coach. So I was really kind of more focusing on that people space. Like I was always very achievement oriented, but then I was suddenly like starting to actually be a bit more people oriented in a more formal way. Plus, I had all of those creative skills. I loved processes. I loved planning. I loved organizing. I loved leading. And I was like, oh my goodness, like when I got into change management, I was like, this is a role that I never knew existed. At high school, nobody ever told me that this was even a career. At university, that you cannot do a degree in change management. You have to,
Really?
like, it's sometimes a subject as part of like a master's or a MBA or something like that, but you don't go to university to do change management.
Mm,
It's something
mm.
that you only find out about once you're in the corporate world, if you happen to come across it, because there's still heaps of people out there who don't know that it even exists. So, how do you happen to come across it? By having conversations, by starting to have the courage, I think, to talk with people around you. And what I would say is don't have this be your leader at work, don't have this be your manager, because they are always going to have a vested interest. They have a bit of like a conflict of interest,
Mm.
because they are hired by the organization to be your leader. They might be the loveliest leader in the whole world. They might truly have your development and growth at heart. Find somebody else, find a neutral third party, whether that is, ideally it's like a colleague or somebody outside, like ideally it's outside of your workplace, so they actually have the full scope of what's possible. Or you could even, obviously hire a coach or do a program or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's about opening your mind up to all the possibilities that there are out there, because there are so many, like there's so many career paths that you don't even know exist. And you'll only find out, and I love to use the example of marketing because that was my first corporate role. You kind of at university, you're like, oh yeah, I'll learn marketing. When you get into a marketing team, you find out that there's all these sub teams in marketing. There's the promotions team, trade marketing, activation team. That's what the team I was in. There's the brand managers who manage the brand. There's the category team who manage the category.
Mhm.
Like there's so many sub teams. You don't know that they exist. You never knew, like you never got taught that. So it is about starting to open up those blinkers, like take those blinkers off, open up your perspective, talk with people, and see all the different possibilities that are out there.
I love that. You're speaking to something I know is sort of off topic, but it's not because it's the exact same thing. When somebody gets upset about a current path, doesn't matter what it is. They just got fired. They got a surprise bill. They found out someone's ill, whatever it is. We think there's only one or two ways to respond to that.
Mm.
And I love what you're saying because it's like, no, there's thousands of opportunities out there. And I think it's so important, Lata, that you're talking about this around career, because I do think we get really stuck in there's a path, the end, right? As opposed to like, no, there's thousands of paths if you start talking, and that through communication is really where we learn what's possible. And I'm so grateful that you actually share numbers. you talk about this, that your friend talked about how much she was making because it blows your mind. And I think I have to be honest, sometimes I get a little bit like there's a conspiracy theory, which is terrible. But I find it just fascinating that we're told not to talk about how much we make because that keeps it all locked up and it keeps possibility out of our brains, right? Because if we can see, oh my God, Susie did it. Why can't, I can do this. I think it's so important that we share honestly about where we are and what's happening because it does give people that mind opening moment. And again, I love what you said, even about your relationship, right? It doesn't matter if it's career or money or love or friendships or food or health or family, right? There's thousands of ways to be a person. And I think what you're sharing is so important, especially when it comes to increasing our ability to earn. So good.
Mm.
If you could reach out to someone who's maybe just starting, who's a woman, young, right? And you're saying, here's one thing I want you to know about you, your relationship to money, and your relationship to your career. What would you say?
I think kind of building on what you were just saying, Sarah, around there's so many ways of doing things, and often we just don't have that information or we're not aware. So, for example, when I was starting out in my career, I didn't know that day rate contracting was a thing. So sometimes it's called day rate contracting, sometimes it's called labor hire, sometimes it's called freelancing, but I
Mm,
didn't know that it was a thing. And so I always just thought it's like you go into a role, like you go into a permanent position, you're an employee, you get a salary, you get your, superannuation or retirement fund or like paid for you. I can't remember what it's called in the US. What is
in the
it
US,
called?
we have several, but the
Yeah,
401k or an IRA, yes.
401ks
Yeah.
and your insurance and stuff, right? Because like we don't get insurance paid for us in Australia. But like you get all of that sort of as a salaried employee and you get that sense of stability.
Hmm.
And so, like, that to me was like, that's the only way that you can work. You're either a casual or you're a permanent. But there's this other thing, which is actually day rate contracting, which is so lucrative because what it is you're either being paid by the company or you can be paid through like a recruitment agency, especially in the project space, where there's areas in companies where you need that temporary workforce,
Mm,
especially in the project space, which is where change management falls into, where it's like you're being paid on a day rate instead. And so suddenly you're valuing your time differently. Like that was the first real mindset
mm,
shift for me was like, oh, like when you start being paid for the day, you start almost treating yourself like a business because then it's like whatever day you work is how much you get paid. And you've got to go and do all of your sums and figures around, comparing apples to apples and making sure you're not worse off overall, making sure that you're better off overall. But generally, you actually are getting this loading because it's seen as sort of like temporary work or, kind of like labor hire work,
yeah,
contingent work. But the truth is that I've never been out of a contract.
I
My
believe
contracts
that.
always get renewed because, I'm great at what I do. I'm sure that your listeners are great at what they do. And so that idea, which is where my parents are just like, how can you go and like work in this like, contingent sort of way? And I'm like, because I'm being paid so much more to do it.
Yes.
And I've got essentially the same consistent income as I would have if I was salaried. I'm literally doing exactly the same work. I'm just getting paid, double to do it. And I've had students as well who like they've literally just doubled their salary by changing roles. Like just one move and they've doubled their salary by changing the way that they work. And it is a real mindset shift because you've got to let go a little bit of that security, but the
Mm-mm.
opportunity, if that's something that is for you, and you've thought through it and you've kind of weighed up the risks and it feels right for you, the opportunity is so great. And I think again, like a lot of people just don't know that that is out there, and then because they don't know that that's a possibility, then they don't see that as a career path. And
Right.
then when you're working that sort of way, maybe then you don't work 5 days a week, maybe you get to work 3 or 4 days a week and make the same amount of money. So maybe you don't earn more, but you're making the same amount of money and what you're getting back is flexibility, freedom, and time.
Yeah, God. I'm so glad you used the word freedom because when I was creating my Abundance Academy, I asked, I don't even know how many women, like my friends were like, will you stop? But like I was asking at restaurants, I was asking at bars, I was asking online, I was doing surveys, like, what is the number one thing you wish you had more of? Freedom. Was like,
Mm,
I was so surprised. I thought it was gonna be like money or
mm,
jewelry or like vacation, freedom. And that
mhm,
is just our ability to choose whatever of any of those things I just listed, or to put up your feet and read a book and drink a cup of like just have a great time, right? So
mm,
I think this idea that you can pop your mindset open to see what's possible and to see there's other ways to make money that still uses your expertise and your talents. I just think it's so exciting. And what a great mindset shift if you feel like you're stuck in corporate to
Mm,
consider consulting. I think it's
mm.
so smart. So smart.
And then it really led me actually, Sarah, to being a consultant because it was like I'd made that first mindset shift from employee to contractor.
Yes.
And it is a mindset shift. Like for a lot of my students, that is the first mindset shift, is just them actually being paid and being valued for what they're worth by changing the way that they are employed. That's it.
Yeah.
That's like one of the biggest wins. And it's especially what you said about freedom, you know, like with clients and things like that. That's always such top of mind, even though it's almost like we're too scared to voice it out loud.
Yep.
We're too scared to voice it out loud that we don't even realize that that is something that's so important to us. And so I made that, and I was a contractor for several years. And then, you know, at the same time as doing that, I had my own side hustle. And then, you know, after several years being a contractor, then I was like, okay, cool, great. Now I've got the funds. So I had built up this sort of safety net. And so I had the confidence and the funds to then go and try something new, which was actually moving to my business full time and starting my own consultancy. So it was kind of like employee, contractor, consultant. And I didn't have to do it in one leap. I didn't have to take that blind leap of faith and put myself completely out of my comfort zone and, you know, like burn the boats. And like, that's not me. Like, I'm not a risky person. I'm very risk averse. I like to take measured, sensible, smart risks, and say moving to permanent to contracting was a strategic decision. I did the sums and the figures and I went, yep, cool. I can handle the perception of contingent work or, you know, not having job security. I can handle the perception of it because it's actually just a perception. I can handle the perception of it because I can see that the wins outweigh the risk. And then the same again when I sort of moved to my own consultancy. So it's almost like I could stepstone my confidence. I didn't have to try and make that leap out of the blue from nowhere. And some people are really great at making that leap. I'm just not one of them. And so it's this opportunity to start to shift the way that you think about yourself, your value, your time, and the money that you could earn. Start to think about it in a bit of a safer container, in a bit of a safer way, without having to make that leap out on your own.
That's so important. And I know there were people who just went, wait, I can do that. Again, creating possibility. So good. So good. But, you know, Lata, I just want to acknowledge something in you that I've heard several times as you've shared your story, you're talking about what's possible, is you make sure you are taken care of. And I think that is so brilliant because there's so many people who hear the burn all the boats thing and they're like, well, I have to do it this way. You don't. You do not. You get to figure out how to do this in a way that works for you. And that's where you find velocity, right? Is when you're true to yourself and you don't let any outside forces dictate what that is for you. Oh, I love it. It's so good. Well, I could talk to you for about 324 more hours, but I know that might not go so well. People might fall asleep. So, but what I'd love to do is for anyone who is just listening to you, they're loving what you're sharing. How can people find out more about you or follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So come follow me on LinkedIn. Come follow me. You can connect with me. I share a lot about career and confidence and change management and change leadership. If you want to come and do my program, it's the Leading Successful Change program, and I can teach you how to actually become a change manager and how to also make that career change into change and everything that you'd need to lead change end to end. But, you know, for me, I think, Sarah, the first step is always just confidence, and it's just about sort of starting to grow that sense of confidence, that sense of self-worth, and really that understanding around, you know, who you are, what you want, the value you bring to the table and what you're worth. And the best way to do that is with my free underpaid and overlooked coaching action guide. And you can grab that from my website. It's got my 5-step career change formula for changing careers with confidence and earning your worth. And you can get it from latahamilton.com/worth it, because you are worth it.
Oh, so good. So good. You guys, we are going to link to that underneath this video if you're watching on YouTube, or in the show notes if you're listening in. Lata, thank you so much for spending time with our girlfriends today and for creating more possibility for all of us to increase our incomes. So good.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fantastic.